Hi, it's Ms. Trevino, and I'm going over units 6, 7, and 8 of the 2020 Pre-AP Biology Midterm Study Guide. I've already went over units 2 through 5, so again, I'll be starting with unit 6. Unit 6 is cell transport. We're going to define the following terms about movement across the membranes. The first one is diffusion. Also, if you copied this at the beginning when I first posted this, you might not have all of them, but just type in what you do have. So we're going to start off with diffusion, and this is a type of passive transport. It's going to move small molecules across a membrane from high to low concentrations. Osmosis is another type of passive transport. Moves water molecules from high to low across a cell membrane. Facilitated diffusion is another type of passive transport. It's when we move large molecules from high to low. But since they're so large, they're going to need help with a protein channel. So they're just like diffusion, we're still moving from high to low, but since the molecules are so large, they can't fit through the lipid heads of the cell membrane. So they're going to need to go through a protein channel that's embedded in the cell membrane to help those molecules get across. Active transport is a type of active transport. It's not passive. This one moves molecules from low to high. So it's moving molecules against their concentration gradient. Normally things want to go from high to low because that's easier, but it's going from low to high, so it's going against the concentration gradient. And because of that, it needs help with energy, ATP. It's going to need that energy to help push it across the membrane, and it's also going to need to go through a protein pump. Again, that pump is going to help push it against the gradient. So in these examples before, I talked about riding a bike uphill and riding a bike downhill. Well, it's a lot harder to ride your bike up the hill. And active transport is kind of like that. When you're riding up the hill, you're not going with the flow, you're going against the flow. You're going against gravity by going up the hill. So you're going to need more energy to do that. Now, when you're going down the hill, you're going with gravity. So you're going with the concentration gradient. You're going from high on top of the hill to low, the bottom of the hill. And going down a hill is a lot easier. You don't need any energy. You don't even need to pedal. You can just kind of coast your way down. So passive transport is like going down a hill. Active transport is like riding your bike up the hill. Then we have exocytosis. This is another type of active transport. This is when the molecules are so large, extra large molecules are pushed out. Well, they're fused with the cell membrane and then pushed out. So again, those molecules are going to have their own little membrane surrounding them. And then that membrane is going to fuse with the cell membrane, and then it's going to push all of that material outside of the cell. Endocytosis is just opposite of that. It's still a type of active transport. Again, we have extra large molecules. They're going to fuse. Again, their membrane's going to be fused with the cell membrane. and then they are engulfed in. They're not pushed out, they're engulfed into the cell. Again, with both of these, exo and endocytosis, the molecules are very large. They can't fit through a protein channel or a protein pump, and they can't fit through the lipids of the cell membrane. So they're going to need their own membrane to help them get across. Next, we have the three different types of osmosis. Isotonic's the first one. And in isotonic solutions, water molecules are going to move evenly in and out of the cell. And it's doing this because the water concentration in the cell is the same as the water concentration in the solution. Next, we have hypertonic solutions. And again, this is another type of osmosis. In hypertonic solutions, water moves out of the cell. The water is moving out of the cell and it's causing the cell to shrink. When this happens, it's because the water concentration is higher in the cell than the solution. So again, water through osmosis goes from high to low. So if water's higher in the cell, it's going to go from the cell to the solution. So it's going to leave the cell. So it's going to cause the cell to shrink. Finally, we have hypotonic. Again, it's another type of osmosis. Here we have water moving into the cell. Causing the cell to swell. And this happens because the water concentration is lower in the cell than in the solution. Again, water wants to move from high to low. So if the solution's higher, it's going to move into the cell that is lower. Sometimes this is going to cause the cell to burst open if too much water is going into it. Now we're on Unit 7 with plants and photosynthesis. Number 24 asks us to write an equation for photosynthesis. And that equation is carbon dioxide plus water plus light energy equals sugar, which is glucose, and oxygen. So I'm going to write out the letters and numbers. 6 carbon dioxide molecules along with 6 water molecules along with the light energy from the sun is going to make sugar, which is a glucose, and oxygen, 6 oxygen molecules, which is the air we breathe. I'm going to make these subscripts smaller by hitting Command, comma, and that is my equation for photosynthesis. And again, in case you want me to write out what they are, it's carbon dioxide plus water plus light energy is going to yield or make sugar, like glucose, and oxygen. Where does it take place in the cell? Well, it takes place in the cell in the chloroplast. And again, those are those green organelles. Inside, it kind of looks like stacks of pancakes. In which part of the plant does it take place? It takes place in the leaves of the plant. Because the chloroplasts are going to be found in the leaves cells. All right, number 25, how do stomata and guard cells play a role in photosynthesis? Well, the stomata are pores on the bottom of the leaves, and they're going to allow for gas exchange. The stomata are made up of guard cells, and these guard cells, when they're swollen, they're going to let carbon dioxide in and oxygen out. And again, I'm going to make these subscripts command, comma, command, comma. And when the guard cells are shrunken, they're going to close shut. And they're not going to let any air in or out, any gas in or out, and they're not going to let any water out. Remember, when water leaves the leaf, that's called transpiration. And during droughts, we don't want that to happen. So the guard cells are going to keep closed so that way no extra water leaves the plant. Now I'm going to label the parts of the flower. The anther is the part where pollen is made, and that's right there on top of the male parts. The filament, it's on top of the filament, which is right underneath the anther. And on this diagram, it's labeled H. The petal, those are those bright colors. J is the petal. The ovary is the female part. That's going to be B, that's the center. Remember, there are more male parts than there are female parts. Inside the ovary, we have the ovum, and that's where the seeds are going to develop for the plant. The stigma is on the very top of the female part, and that's going to be in charge of capturing the pollen, and it's going to go down the style, that's C, and then it's going to go into the ovary. Now again, male and female parts, they have names. The pistil is this entire part right here. On the diagram, it's labeled E. That's the female part, and it's also known as the carpel. And the stamen, that's the male part. That's right here, the anther and the filament, and that's labeled I. Oh, sorry, that's labeled G. I is actually the sepal, and that's not on number 26, but remember, the sepal is in charge of holding the petals together. It's in charge of protecting the flower before it blooms. Number 27, describe the interaction of the male and female parts of the plant. Well, the anther, which is the male part, is responsible for producing pollen. And those pollen grains are going to fall into the stigma, which is the female part. From there, the pollen travels down through the style to the ovary, which is another female part, to produce the seeds, and it can also develop into fruit. So that's how the reproductive system of a plant works. Number 28, what are the xylem and the phylum? What is their function? Well, the xylem and the phylum are going to make up the vascular tissue of the plant. The xylem is responsible for transporting water from the roots to the leaves. And the phylum transports nutrients, not water, throughout the plant. So it's important to remember that the xylem only carries water up. Water always goes from the roots to the leaves because the roots are the ones absorbing the water. The phylum can go up or down throughout the plant because it's carrying the nutrients to different parts of the plants, depending on where it needs to go. So number 8 is the body systems. And I kind of left too many body systems on here than what you would have needed. So I'm going to go through and erase the parts that we don't need. So produces new individuals, that's the reproductive system, and we haven't talked about that yet. C, helps support organs and moves the body. That's the skeletal system, and again, we haven't talked about that yet. E, protects the body and regulates temperature. That's the integumentary system. We haven't really focused on that either. G, protects the body from pathogens. That's the immune system. We haven't focused on that yet. And finally, H, moves the body and pumps the blood and moves food through the digestive system. That's the muscular system, which we haven't discussed that either. So I'm going to go through, and again, I'm going to whiten out the ones we don't use. We don't use integumentary yet. We haven't used immune, muscular, or skeletal yet. And we haven't talked about the reproductive system yet. And again, I'm sorry I left those on. COVID's got my brain all crazy. Okay, so the first one we did talk about was B. It breaks down food into smaller nutrients and removes solid waste. That's going to be the digestive system, B. D, coordinates voluntary and involuntary responses. That's our nervous system, D. F, transports gases and nutrients throughout the body. That's F. The blood is going to transport those gases and the nutrients for us. I, brings oxygen and expels carbon dioxide. That's the respiratory system. J, produces hormones and coordinate body actions. That's the endocrine system. That's where we get our hormones from. And K, filters the blood to produce liquid waste. That is the excretory system, K. Number 30, we're going to write a scenario where 3 body systems are interacting. And my favorite one to use is us breathing. So we breathe in using the respiratory system. And that oxygen is carried to the circulatory system. The circulatory system then uses the blood filled with that oxygen to other parts of the body. And there it's going to exchange with the cells. The blood's going to exchange oxygen with the cells, and it's going to take all of its waste from the excretory system. The excretory system is then going to remove that waste. And that waste can either be the carbon dioxide It could be urine, it could be sweat, it could be anything. But that's usually my three favorite body systems interacting with each other. Number 31, we're given some leaves and we're giving a dichotomous key, and we're going to use this to help us identify the scientific names for these organisms. First is A. This is A right here. If the leaf has many smaller leaves on it, called leaflets, it doesn't have any smaller leaves, and smaller leaves are kind of right next to it, D. Those are smaller leaves. This is one whole leaf. So since it does not have any leaflets, we go to 3. On 3, if the leaf veins are singular, we go to 4, or if the leaf veins have multiple branches. Well, we can compare A to B right under it. On B, we can see that there are small little branches coming off of the main one, but on A, we kind of just have the main ones, except at the top, but that's because the top's probably going to fuse out into more sections. So we're going to say that the leaf veins are singular. We're going to go to 4. Now, if the leaf edges are pointed, or if the leaf edges are rounded. Well, they kind of look rounded to me because pointed would look kind of pointy. So A has rounded edges. That is Quercus stellata. And I probably, definitely, most likely said that name wrong. Remember, whenever you're typing these scientific names, first letter is always capital, second letter is always lowercase, and you're going to italicize it. Now we're going to find out what D is called. D is right here. If the leaf has many smaller leaves on it, which it does, we're going to go to 2. 2 is asking if it's rounded or if it's pointed. Again, these are rounded. So D is called Robinia pseudocasia. And again, italicize it. Finally, E. If the leaf has many smaller leaves on it, which it does not, so that's B, it does not have any leaflets, we go to 3. If the leaf veins are singular, or if they have multiple, they don't have multiple, so they're singular, we go to 4. If the leaf edges are pointed, or if the leaf edges are rounded. These look really pointed to me, so that is Castanea dentata. And again, you're going to italicize that. So that's all I wanted to talk about. That's actually the end of your review. Make sure you study, make sure you quiz yourself. There's also an extra review on Schoology that you can try out. You get 3 chances. And again, it's just extra practice for you to review for your final exam. Remember, this counts as 10% of your grade. So good luck studying.